On May 5, 1945, in the Austrian Alps, 14 American tank crewmen and 10 German Wehrmacht soldiers were defending a 13th century castle from an attack by the Waffen SS. Helping organize the defense was an active Waffen SS officer. This is the story of Castle Itter. It sits above a small village in the North Tyrol region of Austria, 8 kilometers south of the town of Virgil. A fortification on the site is first recorded in 1241. The present building was constructed in 1878. In the 1880s, it briefly belonged to the concert pianist Sophie Mentor. Tchaikovsky stayed there, so did Arthur Rubinstein. By the 1920s, the castle had passed to a Tyrolean lawyer named Franz Groh von Forner. In February of 1943, on Heinrich Himmler's orders, the SS seized the castle from Groh von Forner. It became what the Reich called a Sonderlager, administratively under Dachau, but not a death camp. It was a facility for honor prisoners. People the regime did not want to kill outright. The first arrivals came on May 2, 1943. General Maurice Gamelin, who had commanded the French armed forces when Germany invaded in 1940. Horst Saint-Edouard Daladier, three-time Prime Minister of France. Long C. Anjouho, the head of France's largest trade union. 10 days later came two more. Paul Reynaud, who had succeeded Daladier as Prime Minister in March of 1940, and Jean Barotra, the French tennis champion. Over the next 2 years, the population grew. General Maxime Weygand, who had replaced Gamelin in May 1940. Michel Clemenceau, son of the wartime Prime Minister. The former French ambassador to Berlin, Andran C. Fran-Yiwa Poncet, and in April of 1945, Marie-Agnes Caillot, the elder sister of Charles de Gaulle. The SS knew exactly who they had. What they were going to do with them was the open question. On April 30, 1945, Hitler killed himself in a bunker in Berlin. The Reich did not surrender for 7 more days. In those 7 days, the chain of command broke down. Some units kept fighting, some tried to slip home, and some, particularly inside the SS, decided that if they were going down, they would not go down alone. On May 2nd, the former commandant of Dachau, a man named Eduard Weiter, arrived at the castle. Within hours, he was dead. Most historians read it as suicide. Between the 2nd and the 4th of May, the SS guards at the castle slipped away. The prisoners armed themselves with the weapons the guards had left. They were technically free, but Virgil, the nearest town, was full of armed SS units with nowhere to go. So one of the Eastern European labor prisoners at the castle, a Croat named Zvonimir Chuchkovic, volunteered to walk for help. On the 3rd of May, he walked 64 kilometers north up the Inn Valley toward Innsbruck. That evening, he reached an American advance party. A relief column tried to mount the next morning. It was shelled and then recalled across a divisional boundary. When Chuchkovic did not return, the prisoners sent a second messenger. Around midday on May 4th, a Czech cook named Andreas Krobot rode a bicycle down the hill from Castle Itter into Virgil and asked the Austrian resistance for help. The resistance took him to a Wehrmacht officer. The officer's name was Joseph Gangl. Everyone called him Sepp. He was 34 years old, a career artillery officer from Bavaria. By April of 1945, he had been assigned to defend WMP Argyll. Within days, he had decided not to. The reason was practical. SS units in Virgil were going house to house, shooting at any building flying a white flag and executing men they suspected of desertion. Gangl had quietly started supplying weapons and intelligence to the Austrian resistance, trying to keep the town alive until the Americans got there. When the Czech cook walked in and told him there were former French prime ministers in a castle 8 kilometers away, Gangl understood immediately. The nearest American unit was a tank company that had stopped in Kufstein, 13 kilometers further north. 4 Sherman tanks idling in the town square, waiting for the infantry to catch up. The officer in charge was a 27-year-old first lieutenant from Norwich, New York. His name was John C. Lee Jr. Everyone called him Jack. On the afternoon of May 4th, Sepp Gangl drove a Volkswagen Kübelwagen north out of Virgil, under a white flag, into the American lines. He found Jack Lee and told him the situation. Lee got on the radio, got immediate permission, and climbed into the Kübelwagen with Gangl to look the castle over. That evening, Lee assembled a relief force. He requisitioned 5 additional Sherman tanks and infantry. A bridge near the castle was too weak to take the weight. Most of the column turned back. Lee proceeded with 1 tank, 14 American soldiers, 10 of Gangl's former Wehrmacht artillerymen, and a driver. The tank was named Besotten Jenny, a Sherman M4A3E8 with a 76mm gun. Lee parked it at the castle's main gatehouse, facing outward. That is where it would still be the next morning when the attack came. Inside the castle was one more defender Lee had not expected. His name was Kurt Siegfried Schrader. He was an SS-Hauptsturmführer, Waffen-Führer, convalescing in the village from earlier wounds. He had befriended the French prisoners during his recovery, and they trusted him. When the SS started moving on the castle, they asked Schrader to take charge of their defense. He agreed. He brought his wife and children inside the castle for their safety. This is, to the best of what the historical record shows, the only known time during the Second World War that an active member of the Waffen SS fought on the Allied side. There was one more category of defender Lee tried hard to keep out of the fight. When the shooting started, Lee ordered the former French prime ministers to hide in the cellars. They refused. Reynaud picked up a weapon, so did Daladier. So did Gamelin and Weygand, the 2 generals who had each commanded the French army during the collapse of 1940. So did Clemenceau, Jouhaux, and Borotra. The attackers arrived on the morning of May 5th. Roughly 100 to 150 soldiers from the 17th SS Panzer Grenadier Division, the unit known as Geupitz von Berlichingen. They brought 3 flag guns, including at least one 88mm. The 88 could destroy a Sherman tank at any range it was likely to be used at. The fighting lasted most of the day. Machine gun and flak fire knocked bricks off the upper walls. One falling brick wounded Schrader's wife. The radio man in Besotten Jenny was trying to fix a broken radio when an 88 round punched through the side of the hull. He escaped before the tank caught fire. The tank was the defender's only piece of armor, and it was now gone. At some point during the fighting, a Mauser sniper round struck Sepp Gangl in the head. He was pulling Paul Reynaud out of an exposed window. Reynaud lived. Gangl did not. He was 34 years old. He had been at the castle less than 24 hours. By early afternoon, the defenders were running out of ammunition. Lee accepted an offer from Jean Borotra, the tennis player, to vault the castle wall and run through the SS lines to reach the relief column. Borotra was 64 years old. He went over the wall. When he reached the American column outside Virgil, the first man to recognize him was a French-Canadian war correspondent embedded with the regiment. The correspondent's name was Reynaud C. Lund C. Vesque. 30 years later, he would become the Premier of Quebec. Borotra borrowed an American uniform, climbed onto a tank, and came back up the hill with the relief. Around 4 in the afternoon, a relief column from the 142nd Infantry Regiment reached Castle Itter. It was led by a major named John Kramers. The SS attackers were defeated. Roughly 100 were taken prisoner. The defenders had 1 man killed, Sepp Gangl, and 4 wounded. All of the French prisoners were alive. They were evacuated that evening. They reached Paris on the 10th of May, 2 days after the German unconditional surrender. Sepp Gangl was buried in Vergel. After the war, the town named a street for him. It is still there. Jack Lee was promoted to captain and awarded the Distinguished Service Cross. He returned to civilian life and died in 1973. Kurt Siegfried Schrader was arrested after the war for his SS service. His sentence was reduced in recognition of what he had done at Itter. He died in 1995. For decades, the story of Castle Itter was largely forgotten. The battle happened during the 72-hour stretch when the war in Europe ended. The same news cycle was covering Berlin falling, the death camps being liberated, the German surrender being signed in Reims. The first full-length English-language treatment of the battle was not published until 2013. You will sometimes hear it called the only battle of the Second World War, in which American and German troops fought side by side. That is not strictly true. There was at least one other. What is uniquely true is this. It is the only known battle of the war in which an active member of the Waffen SS fought on the Allied side. That distinction belongs to Kurt Siegfried Schrader alone. Every source is in the description. The next episode is already being researched. There's another on screen now. Subscribe if you'd like to know when it lands.